Hey everyone, it's Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host, Nikki Lentine, and today on the show I'm speaking to Meg Bernier, Assistant Director of Editorial Services and Social Media at St. Lawrence University, about social influencers on your campus who can make an impact on recruitment. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts which are always free and accessible to you in the archives at higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Be part of the broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. You can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter, which I'll be tweeting a link out to right now. Today's show would not be possible without the support of Champlain College and M. Stoner. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Abilene Christian University. In the ever-changing and competitive field of enrollment management, you need to stand out. ACU's graduate certificate in enrollment management has been designed specifically for this purpose. Take the next step to becoming an emerging leader in the profession by gaining the skills and knowledge necessary to set yourself apart. Flexible enough for working professionals, this online program can be completed in as little as 10 months. Explore how you can become excellent in enrollment management at acu.edu/graduate. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Chegg Enrollment Solutions. Chegg Enrollment Services, formerly Cinch, is hosting a special webinar on September 23rd showcasing their new Match Plus algorithm. This new algorithm uses data provided by students and collected during their visits across the Chegg network to help colleges save time finding students interested in them, save money reaching students who need to learn more about them, and recruit smarter by focusing on students who are the best fit for the institution at the height of their interest. Sign up at the link that we will be tweeting out. It's a GoToMeeting link. You can look for that, or tweet at Social Admission to learn more. Admissions Live is also sponsored by Welcome to College. Heading to NACAC in Indy this week, our friends Welcome to College will be co-presenting a session on Saturday at 11:30 a.m. titled From College Fit to College Flourishing. This session will explore research and new programs being ignited to weave positive psychology and the science of happiness into the campus visit experience to increase meaningful engagement with prospective students. So that is definitely one not to miss. So, with that all said, I want to say hello to Megan, who is, I might want to also mention, one of my previous road friends in the admissions world. But now that you've moved on from admissions, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background in higher ed?
Sure. So I started out in higher ed working in athletic media relations, covering marketing for 10 different sports teams here at St. Lawrence. And then moved on from there to Clarkson University, where I worked in admissions, and that's where I met you, Nicole. Yes. And from there, I then went and worked at SUNY Canton in their marketing department, and now I'm back at my alma mater of St. Lawrence, and my primary responsibilities here include writing for various publications and for the website, as well as handling our social media strategy.
Fantastic. And I'm really excited to have you on for this particular topic, because I know you've gotten to see sort of both sides of this experience of really working in recruitment and understanding the outreach that we do, and now you have a role that really does a lot of great work supporting the work that we do in admissions, both in the media field and beyond, I think. And so do you want to speak a little bit to kind of what role you feel you play within the larger world of admissions and of recruitment and helping to find the right fit students?
Sure. So I think all the work that I do for communications directly impacts St. Lawrence's recruitment efforts. We're writing stories, we're putting the content out in the very front, on the web, on social media, and those are some of the first touch points our students have besides visiting campus. But I really feel like we're central communications, so we handle almost all of the admissions publications and different things that we work on. But I really think that everybody, whether they realize it or not in a college environment, is part of that recruitment process. And I feel like whether you're in the admissions office or you work in IT or you work in facilities, you play a direct role in recruitment, whether it's directly or indirectly. So I think it's really important, and something that I really keep in mind is that admissions isn't just siloed, and what I tweet today could impact a student a prospective student or a current student or an alum. So those are the things that I keep in mind. And my job is really just to share those stories about St. Lawrence that resonate and reach prospective students and their parents, which I think is really difficult these days because they're being marketed to so frequently. So what in my work can we be doing content-wise that differentiates ourselves from our peers in a way that students are engaging with it? I think that's a really tough piece in the communications and admissions world right now.
Absolutely, and you brought up so many good points. I mean, the role of everybody from the actual admission counselors all the way through to facilities and everybody in between that is doing something to help impact making your institution a better place and making it what it is. And the concept of differentiation is so important, and I think that's why it's so valuable, especially that we in admissions have a relationship with those in communications and making sure that we're on the same page and saying the same, telling the same story and bringing the same stories to light or similar stories so that our students aren't getting very conflicting messages between when we're talking to them on the road, when they're looking at beautiful view books or anything else that we're producing, and then coming to campus, that all should be a pretty similar experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we really brought up the conversation of this topic around the idea of social influencers, which I think can have so many different definitions. And when I think of social influencers, I especially think of people that are already telling the story and are sharing the story of our institution in a great way. So I know for my campus, one of the first professors that comes to mind is Elaine Young. She's very involved in the marketing world, and she's the kind of program, we don't have program directors in that field, go-to person for marketing and for some of the other media-focused majors that we offer. And she's a well-recognized voice, but she's also pushing students to become well-recognized voices in that industry. And so I think the way that we focus our career-focused education is so clearly represented in her and what she encourages our students to do. And that's true of students that we have on our campus and staff members as well. But when you think of your campus, you know, who do you consider to be the social influencers, whether that's not just on the social media world, but among the campus, the voices that you really want to bring light to?
Yeah, I think like you, we have several faculty members who do a great job representing St. Lawrence and get out there in the media and whatnot. I really see it on our campus as being our students and our student leaders themselves, getting out there and sort of spreading St. Lawrence's message. We have such great students who are living this experience, and they do it in a way like I haven't experienced at other institutions. They really believe in this place. They believe in how it's inspiring them to do what they're doing. And so when they go out and they're the ones talking with prospective students and with their families, those are the messages I see really resonating with that group. I know we have some faculty members who have been here for a really long time who often meet with prospective students and their parents, and those meetings always go great as well. You know, and we're trying to share as many of those stories as possible in our view books and in our other recruitment pieces. So, but I think I most enjoy our students being our social influencers, and I think that's who prospective students want to hear from. I think a lot of times they come to your website and they come to your social media channels and they come to even your recruitment brochures and whatnot, and they don't necessarily want to feel like there's an admissions office or a communications office between themselves and your students. I think they're really just looking for that very authentic voice, and I think our students tell our story really well, even though they don't even realize they're doing it. And I think that's what makes a really good influencer.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more because, you and I, we're paid to say wonderful things about the schools, right? We're paid to believe that it's a great place, but right. Students see through that and know that they they know that there's more stories being told that aren't being told by us, and they want to tap into that resource. And so that is, well, I mentioned a faculty member. I agree. I think the student voices are so vitally important, and so I love to be able to amplify those when I see them expressed. I mean, I think social media tends to be the place that we see those expressed the most, and so one of my favorite things that's happening on campus actually is the library put a sticker up on our balcony with the hashtag #ChampView, and because we're known sort of kind of colloquially in our hashtag as Camp Champ, so it's Champ everything. And the students have really embraced that. And with Champ View, you see all these beautiful pictures taken of all across campus, and especially from the top of the library, which is sort of our signature view. And I think it's kind of neat to see the different students who are using that, because they're not paid employees of the admissions office, and they're not us. They're students who are having this real life experience. And I think if our students are kind of coming in to visit are taking a look at those images and taking a look at the stories that are being shared within the hashtags as well, they're going to get a much better feeling of, oh, okay, this is a place I can see myself at, instead of hearing statistics and things from me and reading them in the view books and things like that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think an important conversation we want to have too is that, you know, like I said, a lot of this I think it tends to happen on social, but also in the written pieces as well. But I think it's so important to figure out how we, in recruitment and marketing, are actually connecting with these students to be able to amplify their voices and share their stories. And so, what steps do you take when you find these students that you want to share the stories of? You know, how do you find them? How do you explore bringing them into the conversation?
Sure. So, some of them come from just talking with colleagues across campus in various departments, talking about who the student leaders are who have great stories or that they've been interacting with a lot, and you know, I get those names that way. I have a student social media team, and they do a great job sort of funneling me ideas of students and different things that we should be thinking about featuring. And then once I get those names, I really try to meet students in person. You know, I'm really lucky in that we're a small campus, about 2,400 students, and so I'm able most of the time to be able to meet the students I want to feature face to face rather than via email. I would much rather interview somebody in person where I can see their eyes light up when they talk about something they're excited about than just sending them a questionnaire through email. And I think it's really important for them to see that it's, you know, who I am. Sometimes I tell them that I run all the social media accounts, and sometimes I just tell them I work in marketing and let it go that way. But I think it's really important to put a face to it, and I think that's the way to connect and get the stories and the emotions. You know, you look at like Humans of New York. There's no way he would be successful if he was, you know, if he was sending out emails and asking people to write and send in their photos. It's the fact that he's interacting with them and in the way that he is, that he's able to be very successful with that. And I think of what we do here on campus in very much the same ways. So last week I had the pleasure of interacting with a student who last spring I noticed one of my student team members told me about this new Instagram account that the student had started on campus featuring the breakfast items that she made. And so at first I just kind of caught on, and you know, it was cute, and then over the summer it really just grew into something really big. I think she has like 1,300 followers now, and she uses things that are in the res hall and in the dining halls and makes her breakfasts, and then she's now has a blog where she adds the ingredients and gives the recipes for people to follow along. And I had the pleasure of meeting her last week to discuss some ideas she has for a blog post about an internship she did this summer that had to do with the Instagram account and some advice she got from the alum that she worked with for the Instagram account, and just what it's teaching her about digital identity and about marketing, and just from posting pictures of breakfast. And of course this really interests me because it's Instagram. Instagram's big here on campus, and it's a student doing something really cool in a very different way, and she's just very excited about it. So, you know, getting the chance to talk with her in person got me really excited about it while working with her. So I think it's the in-person stuff that really works.
Absolutely. I love that story. That's really cool. And anytime you bring food in, I think you have a good chance of more students getting excited about it and following that
Yeah.
account. But I know you've talked about it in a past show too, but I think the way that you guys used Here We Go Saints was such a cool use of Instagram and of student voices too. And so for those who didn't get to see that last show, do you want to talk a little bit about Here We Go Saints and what happened
Sure.
with that?
Sure. So we launched a student-run Instagram account about a year ago. We're coming up on the year anniversary. I can't believe it hasn't been a full year yet, and yet at the same time it feels like it's been 5. So we have a different student who takes it over each week. They apply to take it over, and they come and meet with me. And sometimes if they're able to meet with one of my student team members, they come as well. And we discuss ideas for content and things that they may want to capture and do. We shifted our strategy with it a little bit early on. At first, it was just about filling weeks, and now it's really about, okay, so what's going on campus this week? You're interested in this, you're part of this, so maybe you should take it over this week. So, for instance, this week we have a member of our outing club, which is one of our biggest theme houses on campus. He's going to be running it this week. And that's because upcoming this weekend is Peak Weekend. It's one of St. Lawrence's biggest traditions. We have student groups who will climb to all 46 peaks in the Adirondacks this weekend. So, and he's going to capture his side of it. So I think it's just a really unique way to put students right there in front. The students have the passwords, so there's really, other than me going in and changing it each week, there really isn't too much that I have to do with it other than meeting with them and discussing some content. So it's been great. It's been successful, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from students. I talked with class of 2018 members, who came in this fall, who said that Here We Go Saints was great for them as they were gearing up, especially during the yield process. That's when they started noticing the account, and that it was a great way to kind of see what life at St. Lawrence was like. And it's been a really fun addition to our social media stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think I can speak from somebody who has no connections whatsoever to SLU that I followed it. I loved it. I knew nothing about the school before following it and fell in love with just the stories that students were telling and the pictures they were sharing. It was really neat. And I love the fact that you can so clearly see the goals that you had and sort of the calendar that you were looking at and found a great way to be able to approach that using those student voices. It's such a great example of what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know how to ask this in a way that it doesn't sound harsh, but I mean, like, there's certain voices that are going to be maybe a little bit whiny or other voices that maybe aren't the most positive. And so how do you kind of approach looking at, working with different people and maybe people that actually bring up issues on your campus? I know this is sort of taking a slight direction off of recruitment, but at the same time, I don't think so, because those conversations will continue happening when you recruit students. And so, so how do you kind of deal with those conversations too, I guess?
When I talk with students about running the account, one of the reasons we talk through ideas for content isn't necessarily for me to say, yes, you can post this, or no, you can't, and whatnot. It's really for me to get a flavor of who they are as people. Most of the time I haven't met them before, so this is the first interaction I've had. Typically they come pretty highly recommended from my student team or other people on campus, so we haven't had to necessarily deal with it that much. But, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how to answer the question. I'm not sure how we would handle a really negative situation. I think we had an instance last week where we had a student who posted a photo who it wasn't, I don't think they realized what they were actually posting of, and got some feedback from that. And it's one of those things where I learn something from Here We Go Saints all the time. I learn new things about how to talk to students about it each week. But it's their account. We set out to give them their voice, and I think if we saw something going too negatively, I would probably just reach out to the student and talk through it and talk about it. But I think now, just because of that account specifically, people understand the tone of it, and I think the fact that I have to meet with each student sort of gives, they don't want to go off and do something, that they don't think would be necessarily, I don't want to say on message, but that's sort of what I'm thinking. But I think, you can go through the hashtags on Instagram or on Twitter, and you can see posts that aren't things that we would necessarily want to be out there. And truth be told, I talk with students about the fact that that affects them just as much personally as much as it affects St. Lawrence. And sometimes that's when they sort of perk up and think, okay, you're right, this is, I may need to rethink this or whatnot. So.
Yeah. No, it's a hard question to answer too, but I appreciate what you're saying, because I do think there's an importance of authenticity of what the experience is like, whether that's occasionally, shedding some light on maybe some not as positive things, but I'm glad to hear that you've really focused on working with the students and them getting to know you. That one-on-one real-life experience, like you were talking about earlier, is huge, because I think they're just that much more accountable to what they're doing with you and what they're sharing. So it's nice. And I think the only thing I would add to that, at least in my own experience, is if I see like a lot of negativity about one particular thing, I try to escalate it just on my end. But, I do think that students are getting a little bit wiser too about their sort of broader social identity, like you said. So they do realize it reflects on them a little bit more. So that's a great point to have brought up.
Well, I think it's important to note that I've seen, I don't see as much of that negative stuff nearly anymore. Once St. Lawrence came and developed a social presence, I think students got smarter about how they used it. But I also think a lot of those more anonymous tools like Snapchat and like Yik Yak, students are turning there to vent frustrations about certain things on campus. So even though St. Lawrence obviously we don't have a presence yet on Snapchat, and we can't on Yik Yak, and I would never want to. I think it's important to be monitoring those discussions and seeing what is taking place in those spaces, even though I'm not seeing it necessarily on Twitter anymore, like I used to. Or on Instagram, but now I think it's just moving to different platforms that are less public, which I think will be an interesting discussion, going forward for marketing, because for a long time we sort of knew what students were putting out there and what other people were seeing, and we could kind of combat that with our own messages. But I think now, I don't know if you just lost me.
Nope,
but
that's okay.
My computer went quiet. I think now we don't know what students are snapping to each other. We don't know what they're necessarily yakking about to their friends back home who might still be in high school, who might still be looking at colleges. So I think we have an interesting, I think it's an interesting landscape right now with social. So.
It is. It's a really interesting space to be in. And I think, too, along with Yik Yak, which I agree, it's a scary place, but it's one that you should be at least listening to, without a doubt. And Snapchat, but I think also a lot of schools are seeing confessions pages, which, as scary as they are, and I think a lot of the higher-ups say, what can you do to get rid of it? We need to get rid of it, because they're afraid of the bad kind of PR that could get created from it. I think there's a lot of wonderful things that do happen from it, and like you said, we still need to be listening to these voices and paying attention to what students are saying. And I've actually seen some really cool conversations happening in our confessions. I mean, there's some not so great things in there too, but what's really amazing, I think, is there may be some negative submissions that are sent, but the student comments that happen on them really, I think, give a ton of insight into our institutions. So I think, one, we know we can't really do anything about it, but two, we've, myself and our community manager, I think we've sort of embraced the fact that it's given this pretty special voice to the students to be able to share their frustrations and also find out a place of how they can get help, whether it's talking to counseling on campus, or if it's talking to somebody who can make a change that can help support them in the right way. It's kind of cool to see how that sort of social realm is sort of grown and developed, and to see how the student community interacts with each other on there is kind of a neat way that's very indicative for our campus. So, but yeah, it's an interesting space to be in social, and I know that our jobs are constantly changing. So who knows what will be around, next week, next month, next year. Of totally new conversations to deal with. But I think that all actually loops around to the next question that I wanted to ask you, which my computer's doing wacky things. Which is really, why is it so important to be why is it so important to have this social outreach, and what are your goals for using other voices within the social outreach we do to students?
Yeah. So our goals are just to be as authentic as we can, and giving our students a voice and a place to celebrate their own experiences. We developed a student blog program where anybody can submit a blog post about anything related to St. Lawrence, which I think as more and more people learn about it, they become a little bit more intrigued by it. But I think it's obviously emotion that connects people with, content. So the more our students can be writing about and doing certain things and documenting them first person, I think the better off we are in sharing those stories. And I think it's really important to celebrate what students are doing and to let them know, hey, we worked on this project and it was fantastic, and we really want to celebrate that by letting you tell the world about it, and then we want to share it for you. Those kinds of conversations are always really fun to have, and they're so different than when I was a student here and I was doing these interviews and I was talking to students about the cool things they were doing. But there was this very marketing sort of direction to it. The kinds of questions we asked, we didn't necessarily have places other than the website to be putting those pieces of content. They were always third person. So I think the shift into more first person and or my friend wrote about this or did that, I think was really important. Like I said earlier, I think it's more just about making sure that you don't feel like there's a communications office between the story you're telling and you. So.
I love that. I love the idea. I never really thought about it that way, of first person versus third person storytelling about what these students are working on, and that's so much more impactful and so much more meaningful. We're starting a blog this year to kind of give our students some of those voices, but I think that really resonates with me more than I think anything else I've thought about when it comes to thinking about how to approach the blog. So it's a really great takeaway.
Yeah.
And the next question I have, and actually, before I get into this, I want to make sure our viewers know if you have any questions to use the Higher Ed Live hashtag, and I'll make sure to ask them to Meg. But a really important question in all of this is, how can a campus move from a more siloed sort of outreach, and especially social outreach, to a more integrated one? And I know it's a hard question to answer and one that we're all struggling with, but what kind of steps, and you've shared out some of them already, but how are you moving towards that integrated approach more, especially in your particular role, which I think is vitally important to kind of encourage those conversations to happen?
Sure. So when I took over social media 2 years ago, I came in and thought, okay, I'm going to put together like a social media team on campus of staff members, people who run social media, and each month we'll just meet and talk about all the great things about social media and make sure everyone's doing great in the end. And then I realized that was absolutely the wrong way about thinking about it. I really needed to focus on the main social media channels and our strategy and coming up with a strategy. Figuring out where we needed to be, establish our communities in these spaces, and I really had a lot of learning to do when it came to social media and our community and how, what happens in real life and in social spaces, like how the two of them really blended together. And that took a lot more time than I thought. And so now I'm at a place where I'm really thinking more about the integrated approach across campus. We have key offices, we have our admissions office, we have our alumni office, peer services, student affairs. All of those offices want to have some type of social presence. And I think, it's about these larger questions about content strategy and goals. What are you trying to do with these accounts? How can I help you with this? How can I make sure that what you're doing complements what we're doing? And how can I make sure that none of us are overlapping in workload, that we're sharing what we're doing with each other. That way we're not adding work to our plates. I think we're all, stretched really thin in our jobs. And I think that goes for pretty much everybody in higher ed, that you're just so passionate about what you do, you take on so much. And, I think I look at my role as sort of like the social media community manager as figuring out how to make it easiest on them. And I think a lot of times that sometimes comes off like I'm trying to make their lives difficult, because I am asking those questions about goals and strategies, and saying, I don't really think it's a great idea to have an account on this platform, or, or this one or that one. So that's actually one of my big things for this year. And it's a lot harder than I thought it would be at the when I got started with it. So now that we've made, in my opinion, our main account's pretty good, solid. Now it's really time to focus on like overall social presence, and I think that that'll certainly influence, all members of our audience. I know that prospective students and parents, at least for St. Lawrence, we don't see a ton of interaction with them unless they have specific questions. We don't really see the interaction and the following until they're accepted or during the yield process. So which is pretty late in the game, but at the same time, I know that there are people who are tuning in to us and checking in, even if they're not following us. Had a great interaction with a parent last year who messaged the Facebook page about a couple of different things, and she gave me her thoughts on what she was seeing on other college pages and what was helpful and what wasn't. So it's always great to kind of have those conversations with people. And then sharing what I learned from that with our admissions staff, and making sure, or if it had been a parent of a current student, going to student affairs and making sure that I'm not just thinking about a social media strategy, it's social content, which involves a lot of in real life meetings and interactions with the people all around campus. It's getting everybody involved at all levels.
Mm-hmm. It's so important. The content strategy is such a huge conversation in and of itself, and it's true. It takes a lot of work, a lot of process, and it may be extra work at the front end, but I think what I've seen, at least in my own experiences with our community manager, is that I can see just even months out how much better off our conversations are going to be online and even in person, based off of just thinking ahead of time, thinking about content, thinking more about strategy, and not just, oh, those other schools are on Snapchat, we need to be on Snapchat, or we need to find a way to be on Yik Yak, like you were talking about earlier. We can't be, thank goodness, because that would be a scary place to be, but thinking more about the content we're putting out there, because I think it's so easy for schools to develop these Twitter accounts and these Facebook pages that end up dead and not helpful and not vital to the story that the school wants to be able to share with people. But I love that story about the parent you connected with. I've started to have a little bit of those conversations on even College Confidential, which I know we could kind of take it or leave it, but I think it's cool to see where parents are talking and what questions they're asking, because they're just as important of a part of our audience as anybody else. It can make it.
That's an audience that I really want to think about this upcoming year. And I'm really lucky that I have some great people over in admissions who I'm able to talk with and sort of strategize with. And right now, of course, they're traveling, so it's a really busy time for you all. But figuring out how to reach parents. I actually talked with a member of the incoming class of 2018 this year, and over the summer, and she was telling me that one of the big reasons she decided to come to St. Lawrence was actually our Facebook group, and how in the Facebook group we did 2 chats with students where we said, okay, we're going to bring in 5 current students tonight from 7 to 9 p.m. and they're in here to answer your questions. So please post your questions, tag Meg or Lindsay, my counterpart in admissions, and they'll get your questions answered for you from one of the students. And she said that was a huge reason why she decided to come. And in the same breath, she said, and I was telling my parents about it, and they were saying how beneficial that would have been for them as well, to have, a page or a group or something where they could ask questions. So I think that'll be something that we think about this upcoming year. How can we make sure the information that the parents need is getting to them? It's obvious that emails and mailings don't necessarily always work. So how can we supplement that with something on social media while also not creating another group like we do with the class group, because those take up so much time.
Yes, they do. From someone who got to experience that all through the summer. And I don't know if you saw this on your end too, but I saw more and more students private messaging me than ever before from those groups, which I thought was an interesting switch. But no, I love the idea of trying to get parents, trying to think of the way to be able to support the parents, because I had parents joining that group and joining our app and doing the outreach clearly. And so that's one of our conversations too, is how do we support the parents just as much? And so, yeah, there's so many levels of audiences, and I am happy that, I can see it at your institution, at ours as well, that it's focused on sort of incorporating these important things into the strategy. But it's just so funny to see kind of how things have increased over the last few years. But I guess it's also, we're seeing more and more parents on Facebook anyway, and that's why they keep saying that students are leaving Facebook, whether or not they actually are.
Right.
But it is funny to think about trying to develop like a social media strategy for parents when I don't think that's initially our thought process when we're talking about students.
No, but I think it's beneficial for sure.
Definitely. I mean, they're an important decision maker in this whole process too.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, and for most people watching, it's we even in our own strategy here in just admissions beyond social media strategy, we have an important step that we're kind of looking at along the way of having sort of the parent approval or parent interest in Champlain alongside the student interest, of course, is going to be what we're looking for first. But we're paying attention to that because it is important.
Yeah.
So I know we want to be cognizant of time, so I want to close out this conversation with kind of another bigger kind of question to ask. So just in general, I think, could you give advice, especially to somebody who's in my role, who's specifically in admissions and still doing admissions outreach, but it also is involved in the community manager role, for how to move towards, bringing these voices in, paying more attention to talking to the community as a whole and making sure that the whole community is getting a voice in publications and social media and everywhere else. So, tips, encouragement, people to look to seek as allies in this conversation, any kind of advice you can give.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it just comes from empowerment and making sure that the people that you're interacting with, students, faculty, staff, that you show them that their opinions and their thoughts are of value, and however you do that will just build your relationship with them. And in terms of I don't know how closely admissions works with communications at Champlain. I know that we're two separate offices here, but we work very closely together, and just making sure that the stories that you are coming across or the people you're coming across, that you have a point person who's responsible for a lot of the content on campus, and making sure you're funneling story ideas to them. I think for somebody in my role, even though I have my student team and I'm always actively out and engaging with students, I know that there are stories I'm missing. I know that there are stories I'm missing with the faculty. So I think anytime that you can funnel those to the people you think are really the ones that kind of influence the publications and different things, we love getting emails like that. Came across this great story, this student did this, didn't know if we knew about it. Maybe it's, they come across an article about the student and, it's something that we just tweet out, or maybe it's something that we have to create, or maybe it's something we encourage the student or faculty to create themselves and then have us share it. But I think anytime you ask somebody to, or you want to feature somebody, you let them know and think, I think your stuff's awesome. I think, sorry, my computer went dead again. Your stuff's great. I want to share it. I want to get other people to share it. I mean, just think about how that would feel for yourself. Someone telling you, I love the work you're doing, and I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z for you and help you, get it out there even more. Students light up, faculty members, they want their stuff out there more, personally and professionally. So that would be my recommendation, is just find those key people on campus and become friends with them, get close with them, and then develop these great relationships where you're able to share the information that you come across in your daily happenings. So.
I think that's fantastic advice. And to address your kind of how Champlain works, we're very similar to you. Actually, my colleague, whose name is also Nicole, we consider ourselves a Wonder Team duo, and we try to do everything we can to make sure to keep each other in the loop, because we realize the importance of having a pretty close-knit relationship and having these conversations and sharing stories with each other. So. Yeah, I would echo that advice, and I appreciate that, and I hope that viewers out there that are trying to do this too as well. Any final parting words before I close out our show?
No, I think this was great. It actually, I'm about to head into my meeting with my student team, so it kind of gets me in the mode of talking to them and about some of the things that we're going to be discussing today and in the next few weeks. So. No, just thank you so much for having me, and I hope I offered some kind of advice and help.
I think you definitely did, and I hope, I don't know if I shared your Twitter handle earlier, but I definitely will when I wrap up the show so people can reach out to you, because I know you're a wealth of awesome conversations and articles and involved in all sorts of great chats on this topic, so I'll make sure people share that. So, yeah. So thank you again for being in the show, Megan.
Cool.
And thanks as always to our program sponsors, M. Stoner, Abilene Christian University, Chegg Enrollment Solutions, and Welcome to College. Coming up next on Higher Ed Live tomorrow, host Tony Duty speaks with author Ray Jenko about myths, assumptions, skeptics, and crusaders engaging students through social media. So really great conversation, actually, to follow up on today.
That would be great.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. So everybody tune in to Tony's show as well. Get reminders about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Browse the archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the Higher Ed Live podcast on iTunes. I'm Nicole Lentine, back next month with more Admissions Live. Thank you.